Come on, Facebook.
Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have vowed to take away your Second Amendment rights through gun bans, gun confiscation, and government regulations. Now, Joe Biden is no longer hiding his real intentions, and we need you to take action now.
Whether it's a 9mm pistol or whether it's a rifle, is ridiculous. I'm continuing to push to eliminate the sale of those things. But
the Biden administration is coming after your right to own any gun, and we need you to text PROTECT2A to 888-762-0221. Joe Biden has already issued executive orders. He is now demanding Congress push through radical gun legislation. You can fight back to stop Joe Biden's gun grab, but you must text PROTECT2A to 888-762-0221. Take action to protect your right to keep and bear arms. We urgently need millions of Americans to text PROTECT2A to 888-762-0221. Text PROTECT2A to 888-762-0221.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Weekly Bullet. My name is Paul Lathrop. I'm the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. Joining me on the air today, I've got a team of great people, starting on my right with Lloyd Bailey. If you've been following Second Amendment podcasts, you know Lloyd as the purveyor of Armed Lutheran Radio, among a few other podcasts. Down below Lloyd, Beth Alcazar. Beth is writer extraordinaire for USCCA. And below me, Mike Piwowarski, who I think is still trying to get a sound problem fixed, logging out, logging back in, and we'll make fun of Mike when he actually rejoins us. So that's the team we have going today. Got a lot of stuff to talk about today. I want to get started real quickly with, and I just got this from my boss, Alan Gottlieb, about 30, 45 minutes before the show started. Maryland has banned the AR-15 and really all semi-automatic rifles, and that challenge is going up to the Supreme Court. Let me get the story in front of me here. Dave Koppel has written for Reason Magazine that he, on behalf of SAF, has filed a cert petition challenging Maryland's ban on semi-automatic rifles. There have been 25 attorneys general from the states that have joined in this amicus brief. This, I think, guys, could be just as important to get to and heard by the Supreme Court as the current case, the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association case that we're expecting to hear from the Supreme Court this May or June.
Looks like I'm just sort of scanning through the amicus brief, but with the makeup of the court, I think we're currently in a good position for gun cases if they'll take them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And based on the arguments that we heard in that New York State Rifle Association case, it sounds pretty favorable that, the three liberals on the court are probably going to vote the way we expect, and it's possible we get a 6-3 ruling. Although John Roberts, you never know.
Yeah, Roberts. Yeah, he wants to be the Kennedy. He wants to be the split vote now. He wants to be the one you can never really tell what he's going to do. But thankfully, we do have 5 solid originalists there.
Yeah,
is what I'll say. Beth, what do you think?
You know what always bothers me about things with the AR-15, and it's kind of covered here in this number 4 on this website when it talks about, we're taking away the opportunity for people who might have some limitations or might be new to firearms or might need something that would be considered, quote unquote, easier to fire. And that's what always just really gets me. It gets my goat, I guess, when it comes to the AR-15, because it really is against the people I work with the most. I teach so many women. I teach so many classes with people who are brand new to guns, and we're trying to get people who have bought these AR-15s accustomed to them and learning the basics of the platform. And then we have to sit here and look through things like this that basically says you can't even use this for self-defense, and I don't care if it's easier. And that's what always frustrates me, that last statement, really, to say that improved firearms can be banned because criminals might take advantage of the improvements, would be to say that firearms can never be improved. And to me, that is just such a powerful thing to think about across the board when we're dealing with cases like this that are specifically targeting something like the very customizable, very easy to use and fun AR-15.
Mike, have you got sound back yet? No, Mike does not have sound back. Keep trying, dude.
Doing pantomime.
Yes.
Do you know sign language?
You know,
He does. Okay, awesome.
That brings up totally off topic, but I was watching a couple Thursdays ago when Biden had his talk in New York City. They had somebody doing sign language off the screen to his right, and it was fairly clear if you watched more than 10 seconds of that speech, this person was A, making stuff up as they went along, and B, wasn't buying what he was saying in the least.
I gotta go back and watch that.
That was just wow. I was the first few times, because I pulled clips for the Daily Bullet and the Weekly Bullet last week, and the first few times I never really caught it because I was concentrating on him. And then when I actually, after you've seen it a time, you go looking for other things, and then I started looking at her, and I'm like, is she, because obviously there are things you have to spell, and she made maybe 2-3 letters, but the rest of it, there was just almost no effort to keep up with him, and the expressions on her face was like, this is baloney.
Well, you know what's funny, too? You mentioned expressions. When you're dealing with folks who are using sign language, facial expressions are a huge part of the actual communication process. So it's very interesting if she's having to sign something that she's not in agreement with. We're taught in the community, the deaf community, if you're using ASL or whatever, your face is what's really sharing that true message. So I have no poker face. I would be miserable at it. Everybody would know exactly what was going on in my brain.
And from New York and knew exactly why the crime is on the rise.
Yeah, and then Lloyd, you when writing, you know both sides of this, Lloyd. You were a blogger before you ever got into podcasting. When writing, the keyboard doesn't give away expression. When podcasting and only using your voice, you can sometimes hide. But it's really hard doing video to truly hide your facial expressions all the time.
Well, unless you type in all caps. then it's understood. The thing in this amicus brief that just jumped out at me was number 2, was that the failure to grant review might tempt Congress to enact a national ban. So the worry that I would have with, and I don't have it as much with the makeup of this court, but if the court failed to take this case, I think number 2 is a pretty strong argument, and one that gun rights advocates and gun owners should be a little concerned about, because, and then 3 even goes on to say, well, if we're talking about military arms, well, then these bans might apply to things like the 1911.
Yes. Got us through 2 world wars.
That's right.
All right, I want to get a couple comments in up here real quick. John over on the Facebook side says, I thought Maryland had a Republican governor. And yes, he does. The governor of Maryland is Larry Hogan. He is a Republican along the same kind of vein as, and my brain is failing me right now. He ran for president and is currently senator from Utah, but really is about as Republican as Nancy Pelosi is. Cannot remember. For some reason, my brain will not.
Mitt Romney.
Yes. For some reason,
So
my brain.
I had a hard time thinking of it.
My brain would not come up with that name. But yeah. The Larry Hogan I would put in the same category of Republican as Mitt Romney. And by the way, both are pro-gun control. So, and then I want to get this one up. Pete, Gun Website says, great points, Beth. So often the pro-AR-15 argument is simply don't take my property, rather than this rifle is easy for many people. Do not take away their practical and efficient option.
Yep.
Absolutely. Again, to me, that is such a huge part of the argument, and especially as we're seeing more and more people who have purchased them over the last couple years. It's such a disservice to the folks that have fewer options due to whatever abilities or lack of abilities or training. I mean, to learn the AR platform is so easy, and just really frustrates me that we say, oh, too bad, so sad, it's big and scary and it holds a lot of ammo, so it's obviously needs to be banned or needs to be regulated or needs to be controlled by somebody. So,
Mike, what audio yet? Can you talk to me? Oh, doggone it.
Anybody read lips?
I'm sorry, dude. Well, let's. I'm reminded, and I this is anecdotal. I don't know if this is actual or not, but I was told not all that long ago in the past that when somebody went through basic training, the AR was held up against a drill instructor's nose, and the drill instructor with the butt of the rifle against the nose was pulling the trigger, demonstrating how light the recoil is on the AR. Yeah. And so it's certainly, if you are of a age where you are mature enough to handle firearms, anybody that has grown up enough to be able to handle a firearm should be able to handle an AR-15.
Yeah. I taught my daughter when she was 6 with an AR, and she was like, oh, that wasn't bad. It was the noise that bothered her more than anything. It wasn't the recoil. And then running over to pick up the brass and burning her fingers, but that's just kids grabbing things.
Yeah. Well, the next thing I wanted to talk about in the list today, this also pertains to the SAF, and that is SAF has a on-staff investigative reporter in the form of Lee Williams, and he filed a Freedom of Information Act request to the ATF, and this happened a long time ago. This is right when Biden started saying we got to go after these rogue gun dealers. He filed a FOIA request asking, okay, what gun prosecutions have you done against rogue gun dealers? And it's been now 8 months, and they've yet to fulfill his FOIA request. Even with the information would be just a few keystrokes in a computer search. It would be so simple to come up with. At what point are we going to actually put teeth in the Freedom of Information Act law? I mean, somebody honestly needs to be brought to, they need to lose their jobs over this, my opinion.
Well, yeah, Biden keeps talking about rogue gun dealers, and it should, like you said, it should be really easy to find out how big a problem this is. Provide us some statistics so we can actually see how big a problem it is. But no, it's always going to be just rhetoric. It's the same thing with ghost guns, and I think we have a story on that later as well. They're always keen to talk about what a big impact these things have on crime, but they don't provide you any statistics to back it up. It's all emotion and scare tactics.
Well, and I love how the blame is always placed on anyone who is trying to, supply firearms or supply training or supply accessories. It doesn't even matter nowadays. I mean, people are going to go after you if you have pro-gun in your business or in your name or in your social media. But why aren't we going after those folks? And we always say this, but it's absolutely true. What about the folks that are criminals, and we know they're criminals, and we know what kind of trouble they're getting into, and of course they're the ones always getting the deals, they're the ones always getting let go or lighter sentence, or people turning their heads and looking the other way. And it's just interesting how can they ignore that? How can you completely, to me that's the biggest logical fallacy here, is granted, fine, if there are some folks that are completely rogue, that are doing some nefarious things, that are doing things illegal, great. Like you said, let's point those out, let's find that, let's get the data. But you can't ignore the other data. You can't just pretend it doesn't exist and say one is definitely more significant than the other. So that's what really puzzles me the most with this kind of thing.
Yeah, I want to get a comment in here real quick. Actually, two comments I want to get up. Going to the story we were talking about just a few seconds ago, Lee writes great stuff, that from Virginia's Shooting Sports Association. And going back to the AR-15, and speaking about firing it with the butt against the nose, New York Outcast says, I didn't see that in BASIC, but I don't doubt it. So, all right. And the going again, I hate to keep jumping, but sometimes there's a little bit of delay, and when people type something, it has to go into YouTube and Facebook and then get back to my software and then to me. So, but going to the Lee Williams story and ATF just sitting there. I mean, honestly, right now, SAF could sue the ATF, but the only thing we're going to get out of the ATF is the forced release of the information when it finally makes it through court, and some of the attorney's fees back. We won't get a cost to bring the lawsuit back. We won't get anything like that back. And by the way, the attorney's fees would just come out of the government's general fund. So yeah, it would end up coming out of Lloyd Bailey's pocket, out of Mike Piwowarski's pocket, and out of Beth Alcazar's pocket. The government wouldn't hurt at all for this. So,
well, they're playing with everybody else's money.
Yeah, exactly. The government, and until the government is taught, look, this is not an unlimited checkbook, and with the current administration, I don't think they're ever going to learn that lesson. So, where do we think, what I think I'd like to talk about next, and this one, I think we may end up spending a little bit of time on this one. This week, a Rasmussen poll came out, and folks, this is good news. We are winning, at least in the minds of the general public. We're winning. Let me pull up the story so I can get the exact numbers out of the poll, and it's behind a paywall. Sorry, if I'm going to have to rely on memory because I don't have the other story up, which actually broke it down for me. I want to say it was 63% of Americans do not want stronger gun control laws. They only want what we currently have to be enforced. That's a win, and when you break it down by parties, of course, that almost reverses when you talk about only Democrats. But even then, it's not to the six. It's not. They barely break a majority in Democrats that want stronger gun laws. I consider myself among the, growing, but maybe 1% that still want all gun laws everywhere abolished. Shall not be infringed to me means shall not be infringed. If I want to go buy an A-10, I ought to be able to go buy and fly an A-10.
Yeah, the survey asked, it looks like it asked 3 questions. They do show you what the questions are. Does the United States need stricter gun control laws? Does the United States need stricter enforcement of existing gun control laws? And then the third question, I would love to see these numbers. Which would do more to reduce gun violence in America, passing new gun control laws or stricter enforcement? And I think part of the reason that we're seeing this change in attitudes is, one, we're seeing the last 3 years, we've seen nothing but crime and Democrats doing nothing about it. And 2, since the pandemic started, we've had, 7.5 million new gun owners, first-time gun owners, and half of those, a large percentages of those are not traditional gun owner demographics. I think more than half are women, and 20% are black, and 20% are Hispanic.
Mm-hmm.
So people who would typically be in favor of stronger gun control laws are kind of seeing that maybe protecting myself, taking responsibility for my own protection is really the better course of action. Because you can see on the news every night that the government's not going to do it.
Oh, no.
That's for sure. What's interesting to me about the way that they presented this survey, it's like it's only 3 questions, but I mean, you read them out, but look at how they're not quite balanced there. The first one deals with, do we need stricter gun control? The second one, do we need stricter enforcement? And then the third one kind of pits the two together, or pits the two against each other. The second question, though, think about that. It says that 28% disagree. So no, 28% says the United States does not need stricter enforcement of existing gun control laws. But think about how that question is so open-ended that the chance to interpret that could be just completely wild. I mean, think about those who do support firearms and do support the Second Amendment. We could look at that second question and say, heck no, we don't need stricter enforcement of these dumb laws. So I think right there, the whole survey is very skewed. I don't think it's very reliable at all. So that second question, I would say yay on the 63% of Americans believe that we need stricter enforcement. Okay, great. Maybe that as rather than we need more laws. But I don't know. It seems like there should be a better way to present that survey so they're not going to get so much randomness in there, because to me that's just not a very reliable or valid survey to me.
Yeah. Mike, I made one adjustment on my end. It shouldn't have made a difference, but let's see if it did. What do you think, bud?
Mitt Romney.
Yes. Oh!
Your personal hero, right?
Well, I've been trying to answer that trivia question.
Better late than never.
That's right. All right, so Beth and I are going to shut up and let Mike talk for a while because he's been fairly...
You got 20 minutes, man. Go.
All right. Are we ready to talk about the designated hitter rule?
Yeah, the best thing that ever happened to baseball, man.
Listen, it's the downcast of Western civilization as we know it. Ron Blomberg, April 1973, takes the batter's box for the Yankees against Louis Tiant and the Boston Red Sox, the first ever designated hitter. And if you look at that date, the world has gone downhill since then. I could blame it all on the designated hitter.
All right. Wow. All right, well, let me get this one. I think. Let me get this.
That'll probably stir up more.
William on. Yeah, there you go. We already got William. Like, there we go. But let me get this comment up here from Rick over on the YouTube side. He says we may have allowed. Yeah, that's even small on the screen for my eyes, but. We may have allowed ourselves to become slaves to the lexicon of the left. They say gun control, but it is really crime control. They say gun rights, but it is human rights. Amen. Their gun rights are human rights, first and foremost.
Yep.
And he followed up with, of course, the natural human right to self-defense, which all humans are endowed with from birth, and which the Second Amendment exists to protect that right from infringement from malfeasant despots. Yes, absolutely. All right.
Good word, despots. Good word.
Yes. All right, and I promise one last comment, and we're going to get back to our stories. We are definitely winning. The fact that they are only bringing old, failed anti-gun bills to the table indicates there is no ambition or appetite to champion the anti-rights point of view. It's time to remove gun laws. And here, Pete, I want to put this to you. Here, Pete, is where we are allowed to be. We're allowed to be negotiators. You know what? I want all of the gun laws to go away. But you know what? I'll settle for, I want you to give me all my rights back. How about we just repeal the 1968 Gun Control Act? And we'll leave it at that for now, okay? Because it's gone the other way for so long. So... Mike, I'm going to let you go first, man. A lot of comments came in there, and you've been forced quiet for so long. What do you think, bud?
You know I'm with you. Listen, I want them all back, and I want them right now. But I'm willing to use that dirty word, Paul. I'm going to use that word. I'm willing to compromise. I'll take the Gun Control Act of '68 off the table this year, and next year I want the National Firearms Act of '34 gone. So a little bit of a compromise. I'll take half this year and half next year. So I don't want to hear that we never compromise.
The left is good with incrementalism. Why can't we do it?
Yes.
That's right.
Yes. And Mike, I can't remember, because Mike is the only one that's on the panel today that's been on the Weekly Bullet with me this week. But I can't remember, Mike, if you and I talked about this one, or actually I think it was Amanda and I that talked about it. The next one is... that I want to talk about is if you fail a NICS check, there's a bill they're trying to get through the Senate, and get this, the Senate, where it's 50-50. If you fail a NICS check, they're looking to open a full-blown Senate investigation, or full-blown federal investigation on you. They want a law passed that every denial in the NICS system, and by the way, over 90% of them are false positives, but everyone that comes up with a denial now has to have a full federal investigation. Yeah, they're going to get a few bad actors, but that seems to me like a whole bunch of waste of federal money.
Well, the waste is the background check itself, right? You know, all that does is predict the past, not the future. This is we see time and time again. If we have the background checks, we'll be able to stop any violence with guns, and it never happens that way. We all know that. This is just feel-good legislation. But Paul, you know what? If we're going to have them and we're going to try and stop criminals, maybe there's a couple of counties where I live, a couple of the bigger counties where they monitor the 4473s and the applications, and if somebody flat out fails, then they go after them for possession of a firearm, because while they were at the store, they were in possession of it. So they make them prove whether that fail was true or not. So again, it's a couple of local sheriff's offices here where, listen, they're doing I think they're doing their job. They're trying to keep criminals from having guns in their hands. Now, if it was an inadvertent thing, if it was somebody's, is a stolen identity, they get that. They're not robots. They're investigators. So. Mm-hmm. But I think this stops them. I know there's a lot of criminals out there that will go to buy a firearm and wait to get denied, and that's the way. That's the quick and easy way that they know if they have an active warrant for them as well. Many gun stores combat that now by making you pay for the gun first. But let's say you go in and buy a $50 lower receiver and it comes back denied. I'm only out $50, and now I know I have a warrant out for my arrest, so it's time to get on the lam or whatever it is. So I kind of like the idea of going after the people that are illegally attempting to purchase firearms. As long as that law is in place, let's go ahead and enforce it.
Okay. Yep. I don't have a problem with that.
Yep. Well, I mean, that's what we're sold. The bill of goods that we're sold about the background checks is that it's going to stop criminals from getting, bad people from getting firearms, but it never really does. Because we never really follow up, and we never prosecute the people who go out, and the small number of people who do go out and try to buy a gun illegally. through an FFL. But who was it a few years ago when they were asked about this, said, well, we don't have time to prosecute paper crimes or something like this. I'm trying to remember who this was.
Yeah.
It was the DOJ. So either follow through and prosecute the bad people, or get rid of the background check system entirely. It doesn't make sense if you're going to do kind of halfway.
Right. Yeah,
To me, this really feels like they're grasping at straws. I mean, from what we've just been discussing right now, and from what we know, you've already mentioned it, Paul, you've already said 9 out of 10, 90% are giving us false positives. I mean, why would we put any more time and resource and energy into something that's already a failure just to 100% look into the ones that are, a denial? This is ridiculous. I mean, if it were reversed and maybe 10% of the time we got false positives, I could actually say, okay, at least they're thinking clearly, but this is complete asinine politics and stupidity, if you ask me.
Well, and let's, it's actually fairly rare for denial. My understanding is it's fairly rare for a denial to come through to a gun store. A delay, yes. A denial is actually fairly rare. And so
we would get the denials, the occasional denials, and they were probably, looking back at it, Paul, you're probably right. It was probably more delays or postpones until they came back. But we'd get the denials and we'd get nothing. We'd hear nothing back from them. Now, Florida's a little different that our state police runs it, not the FBI. So they'd be a little diligent and start asking questions about, is he still in the store? Is he still in the store? And you knew the police were on the way when they started asking that question. But for most other states out there, it's like you said, it's a waste of time. It's a bill of goods. I think the last numbers I saw was, now this is all pre-COVID, the numbers. There was something like 100,000 denials, and if you go with 90% of those, let's just play those numbers. 90% are false. That's still 10,000. I think the DOJ in 1 year looked into 11 of them, if I recall the numbers correctly.
Wow.
So it's just, what's the point? And those 11 were the only reason they looked into them is because they had nothing else on the guy and they wanted him for some other reason. I'll enforce the parking ticket if I can't get the murder charge to stick.
What was from that movie? I'm trying to remember. I cannot remember the movie, but the quote was that they or the I don't know. It's not even a quote. It was they got. My brain is freezing up the more I'm trying to do this on command. So, but they got Al Capone. They got Al Capone into prison on tax evasion and mail fraud, and they were going mail fraud. Well, it may be an off-kilter law, but it's got teeth. And so, let's. I want to get some comments in here because the comments are coming in quickly enough that they're about what we're talking about right now. Smeggy says, how many resources are we going to waste for the 10% of people who actually fail the check? Yeah. And what I wanted to go with is, let's say 5% of the people who go into a gun store, fill out the 4473, come back as denied, not delayed, but denied. And 90% of those are a false positive. That means what? Then that means that of everybody that goes into a gun store, if the math in my head is correct, somewhere around 5 in 1,000 probably shouldn't be getting firearms. Those are pretty damn good numbers.
It's interesting to think, too, what would be the ramifications or what would be the aftermath for the person who got the false positive and now they're investigated. And now what? What does that look like? How does that feel? How long does it take? What does it do to you? What does it do to your mindset? Or, how public is it? You've got people looking at you depending on what your job is or how maybe well known you are in a community. I mean, to me, that feels like, okay, we're going to get into some fun other lawsuits or some other fun issues or problems, and we're creating this bigger tangled web of madness by, pursuing this kind of an investigation, it seems.
Well, I don't even know whether we have a mechanism by which people who are unfairly denied can actually appeal and get their rights back.
There is an appeal process if you're denied. I do know that.
But if you're on the list and they say, like I had a friend back in North Carolina who ended up being denied because he had the same first, last name and middle initial as a convicted felon, and he couldn't buy a firearm. How do you go about clearing that stuff up when you've got such a huge Byzantine system like we have in Washington, D.C.? How does the average person actually fight that without spending a crap ton of money on lawyers? And when you're just trying to defend your family from the crap around you, you probably can't afford a lawyer in the first place. How do you go up against the federal government who has you on an essentially a felon list?
Once again, Lloyd has proven how much this is going to hurt the people who need it the most. I mean, just your average citizens, just those folks that are trying to get by. Like you said, I mean, just like we're going to deny them their right to protect themselves with whatever the heck they want to, and now they're going to be stuck in a corner where they're labeled, or now they've got the red letter, or they're on Washington's naughty list. What happens now? You can't afford to get out. Go to jail. Do not collect $200.
Right?
Yep.
Let me get this one up, and this is gonna. I keep telling you, we have the smartest viewers and the smartest listeners around, and I also I'm beginning to think that they have a great sense of ESP, because Rick is leaning right into our next story. Is there a pending legislation to charge the individual for the privilege of background checks? Rick, it's funny you should ask, because I call it a tax. Although the person that's putting the Democrat from New York, and I'm trying to get through. Let me open this link so I can get the legislator's name here.
Nydia Velasquez.
Yes, U.S. Rep. Nydia Velasquez is pushing through a bill in the House right now, and again, it's the House, not the Senate. She wants to add $1 for every NICS check to help prevent gun violence. Yeah, it's a fee, not a tax, but no, let's face it, it's a tax. Yeah.
Democrats like creative ways to raise money. They don't have enough to spend. They've spent trillions of dollars in the last 2 years during the pandemic. So why not? When I talked about this on my show for this week, coming up tomorrow, it'll be released tomorrow. There's a story talking about how our gun sales for January dropped kind of off a cliff in January compared to the previous year. So you're talking about $28 million in background checks if this were to be passed. So that's a huge amount of money. I don't believe for a minute this has anything to do with trying to prevent violence or trying to fund gun violence research. This is all about just an alternate way to raise money so they can spend it.
Well, and my good friend Rob Morris, as a saying he often uses, the power to tax is the power to destroy. And that's, I think that anything they can do to increase the cost, to increase the pain of getting a firearm is something they're going to look to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
If it discourages gun ownership, that's a side benefit, though. I mean, let's be honest.
Another
and this
loophole
idea,
or another hoop.
right? And the suggestion that they're going to use the money to pay for research at the CDC, because the CDC has been so trustworthy over the last 2.5 years. This is a great idea.
14 weeks or 2 weeks to flatten the curve, exactly. 2.5 years.
Definition. I would love them to actually, lay that out for me. What is gun violence research? What exactly are you going to do to research gun violence? Are you going to look at criminals? Or are you going to look at law-abiding gun owners? It would be very interesting to see what in the world they think this gun violence research even is.
Yeah, you're. Let me get. We got some great comments coming in. Let me get this in. Smeggy says John Locke talks about how minorities are most likely to have a name similar to someone prohibited. Do you think a Jose Jimenez might have been in trouble with the law somewhere? Do you think maybe? Well, I will just about guarantee you there's been plenty of John Smiths in trouble with the law, but I'm sorry. When I fill out a 4473, I always include my social. And I know there's a way you can get an individual PIN so that nobody in the United States, it doesn't go off your social, it doesn't go off anything like it. It just goes off your individual PIN. And
that's how you get the PIN.
Okay.
That's you get the PIN by being denied. So once you get denied, and then they tell you, okay, we didn't mean to deny you. They don't remove you from the register. They just give you that special PIN because they figure the chance of the other guy really knowing the special PIN is minute. So you're on a denied list with a special PIN is how you get approved.
Oh, wow.
And you get to the approval, the denial process. Now it varies from state to state. If you've got a local law enforcement agency inside, you get denied. They hand you a form, and you've got 20 days to get that form turned back in. Now, Paul, I think you and I may have talked about this. Was it, what's the state? Is it New York, I think it is right now, that's looking to extend that to 30 days?
Vermont, and they did.
Yeah. So you have 30 days to, you have 20 days to apply to get your denial taken care of. The state normally would have to give that to you within that time period, so you have the opportunity to go back and reapply. Well, but they're taking 30 days to answer. Well, the problem is the original background check's only good for 30 days. So in a sense, it's a denial no matter what. They're going to take 30 days to get back to you in a 30-day period.
Let me. We got gun websites. Let me get this one up here. We know from the 4473 archive discovery that the FBI, ATF, even with a billion 4473s, are not able to use the data to do any enforcement or prevention of crime, and we shouldn't be expecting the feds to do so.
Right.
Yeah. What I expect the feds to do is to just go away and leave me alone. Will that happen in the near future? Probably not. But what I expect them to do is just go away, leave me alone, and stop growing.
Yeah. Right?
Well, that kind of leads into another story that you had brought up, the one about Operation Chokepoint.
Oh, yes.
You know, I was thinking about this earlier, and we, on the right, typically we want the government to leave us alone, and we're just like, go away, leave us alone, we want to live our own lives. The left is not like that. The left is all in our business, and they will, they want to force us to conform. And the way they're going, the way they want to do it, if they can't do it legislatively, is to go through institutions like banks and credit card companies and retailers and try to pressure them into conforming in ways that are good for them politically. And on the right, we tend to be more standoffish, and we don't use the same tactics. And I think that's to our detriment. We don't stand up and fight back in the same way the left fights for their political prerogatives. We simply sit back and say, "Oh no, don't do that. We shouldn't be doing that." Well, okay, let's make it hard on these institutions the same way the left does.
Well, and I think we kind of are in the case of Texas and Louisiana. They both have said, look, banks, if you want to do business in Texas and Louisiana, there are two states that have these laws, you cannot have anti-gun policies. And to the point where Wells Fargo has said, okay, Texas, we'll comply. Please let us do business with the state again. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that when you come to Los Angeles District Attorney asking Wells Fargo, please, Wells Fargo, start denying gun purchases, I think Wells Fargo might be a little bit more interested in the state of Texas allowing them to continue to do business rather than the county of LA saying, please come help us.
Until the Twitter mob hits them, and then they end up, facing the public backlash that the Twitter mob on the left typically brings. And unfortunately, too many institutions think that Twitter mob is real, and so they bend to it, and they bow down, bend the knee, and do whatever the left wants. And that's why you saw, in the aftermath of all the rioting in 2020, you saw all the Black Lives Matter stuff, and that's why they tend to think that the outrage from the left that hits them from Twitter and in the media is indicative of the attitudes of the general public, when it's not.
Let me get Smeggy's comment in here. Although this may be more than a week-old story, I think we might have talked about it last week, but I'm gonna use this as an excuse to bring it up again. It's nothing to do with money. In the bill, they make sure to mention the store keeping a receipt and sending in the records. Doggone it. Where Smeggy, I got to look over here because that's just too small on my main screen. They see us going after the database they made with 4473. They want a backup. And the story has been around. We may have talked about it last week on the Weekly Bullet. I know in the past 2 weeks sometime it's been talked about, but the ATF has gone to all 4470, to all FFLs, said keep your 4473s now effectively forever. And when they get shut down, they're going into a database. When the stores eventually close, they're going into a database somewhere within the ATF, and the ATF says, "Oh, that's okay because once it's computerized, it's not searchable." Bullshit!
Well, yeah,
I'm sorry. Was that external?
Yeah, that's how computers work. Yeah, it's on a database. It's just we don't look at it. And that's worse than you think, Paul. We talked about that. When the inspectors come in and the first thing they do is look at your 4473s, they're looking at the hard copies of them. But to make their lives easier, they ask you for the digital copy because most dealers these days have a digital acquisition and disposition log, and they ask you for a copy of it. That way they can go back to their office and balance their database versus your database, which is they take your database. So every time they come in every 3 years, they've got what you've done as far as transaction record goes. And that's everything: name, serial number, type of firearm. They're not getting rid of those. They keep those for investigative purposes, for administrative purposes during the inspection period. So ATF has all your records. You're never going to get back further than 3 years as far as records go. The ATF has everything.
Well, and this is another reason why we need to fight against universal background checks, because of all the weapons I own, over half of them have been bought privately. And not all of it. About half of I bought at a gun store, and about half have been bought privately. So, does the ATF know that Paul Lathrop has been to a gun store on multiple occasions? Yep. Do they know everything I got? Nope.
Yeah.
Well, and the background, universal background checks, so-called, won't change that. I mean, the government, as much as we like to talk about their big brother, they're not standing over your shoulder watching every transaction you make. At least I don't think so. Not yet, anyway.
They are now. They're watching you. You said something.
They're watching. So you go down and meet a friend in the parking lot and sell them a gun, or it doesn't have to be a friend, and you sell a gun. They're never going to know that unless the gun turns up in a crime scene. And even then, they're probably not going to be able to trace it back to you. And that's the real problem. The reason that, and I don't know why they think this is going to change. I think they think it's going to deter people from actually selling guns privately. But I don't know why in the world it would, even if they passed it, because it might deter people from selling to people who are absolute strangers, because you don't know whether you're dealing with a cop or a federal agent. Cops have better things to do. So I've never really understood the logic behind universal background checks, because they're not going to do anything. And I have to think that the politicians who propose them know this. They're just trying to create another obstacle for gun ownership.
Well, I would agree with you there. Since, remember, it's been since 1968. There's the only requirement to put serial numbers on firearms if they're made by manufacturers. So there's a significant number of firearms out there that have no serial numbers on them. And remember, it wasn't until the late 80s, early 90s that we started to actually put things on 4473s and track them. So the majority of firearms that were bought and sold prior to 92, 93, the government has no record of where they are. So if we do universal background checks and start requiring person-to-person transaction sales, now they can put those back on the books. Because when you go to get a 4473 done at a dealer, say, Lloyd, you and I, we're going to abide by the law. I'm going to sell you my Glock. We're going to go in the gun store, and they're going to do a background check so we can make sure we're clear. Problem is, they don't just do the background check on you. They fill out the information on my Glock, take it into their log, acquisition log, and then log it out to you when the background check comes through, thereby putting this off-the-books gun back into the books. And when they ever want to come around and take the registry, now they have all these firearms that were pre-92, pre-93, or ones that have been sold more recently. I bought it new, sold it to somebody else that was off the books. Now it's time to put it back on the books. Universal background checks is going to accomplish getting more than half the firearms in the United States back into the active registry that they know where they are.
Yep, exactly. I want to get this one in. This is just funny, and I've got to get funny ones in. So I got to get this one in. This one from John on the Facebook side. I don't give a, because Twitter is not a real place, Dave Chappelle.
I love that guy, Dave Chappelle.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And John, he's not too bad.
And I want to get, and speaking of not a real place, I want to get this last story in. Although he is a real person, supposedly, I want to get, I don't think we're going to have time to get to all the stories that I had up there, but Beto O'Rourke, who was running for president 2 years ago, and Mike and I talked about this one the other day. Beto O'Rourke was famous when he was running for president for saying, "Hell yes, I'm coming to take your AR-15." And a lot of us had said, "Okay, you stack up first at the door." Now that he's running for governor of Texas, he's like, "No, I support the Second Amendment. I don't want to take anybody's guns away." That's one heck of a backflip there, Beto.
Proof that he will say anything and everything to get elected. He learned nothing. Well, yes, I would say he learned from losing to Ted Cruz for a Senate seat. He learned from his horrible presidential run that if you pop off a bunch of leftist garbage in a debate, it'll come back to bite you. So he went further in saying that he's not going to take the AR-15 away from you. He said he doesn't want to take anything from anyone. He wants to, get this, defend the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
And then went on to complain about how Governor Abbott had endangered police officers by signing off on the permitless carry law. And that's another story that I talk about on my show on Sunday. My response to that was, okay, show me the data that any lawful citizen permitless carrying in public has ever harmed or threatened a police officer. you don't have that statistic. You don't have, because it doesn't exist. And it's just, so it's sort of like saying, I support the Second Amendment. I want to defend the Second Amendment, but. And so he's hedging his bets here and hoping that Texans won't remember the hell yes thing from the debate.
Yeah,
they're going to
realized he's realized that Texas is bigger than just El Paso, where he was from, where they were anti-gun, and that Texas is pro-gun. So, like you said, he's a flip-flopping fool. What's it going to take to get elected? That's what I'm going to say.
Yep.
Well, yeah, that solidified him as a politician through and through by being that wishy-washy on such a major issue. I mean, if you can be wishy-washy or flip-flop on something that's maybe less in your face in America and obviously not supported by an actual like constitutional right or protected right, then yeah, that you are definitely a politician, and I'm staying away from you because that's all you care about is votes. Mm-mm.
I hope somebody hits him with a follow-up question. It was like, all right, what changed? Why you were, hell yeah, I'm going to take your guns. Now I don't want to take guns from anyone. I want to defend the Second Amendment. All of that in the span of 2 years. What's different now? What changed for you? Because nothing on the ground has changed except that you lost. So,
yeah.
There's a reason we call him Beta Male O'Rourke.
Rick over on the YouTube side says, say, does banning ghost guns deprive Casper of his 2A rights?
That's good.
And New York Outcast also on the YouTube side says, I tried to buy guns at a buyback next to the police, and the people were still calling the cops on me. That's pretty sad stuff. All right, we are coming up on the hour that we have available for the show today. But as I like to do, as we're on our way out, I'd like to have everybody let the people know where they can find your stuff. Lloyd, you haven't been on with me in quite a while. Let everybody know about Armed Lutheran and where they can find your podcast, man.
Okay. Thank you for having me on. By the way, I am. We've been podcasting for now 300 episodes, and you can find all of our stuff at armedlutheran.us. You can find us on, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, pretty much anywhere. Just do a Google search for Armed Lutheran Radio, and you'll find us. We're on Facebook. We're not on Twitter anymore because I hate Twitter. You'll find us on MeWe. You'll find us on Getter, but you won't find me on Twitter, so don't try. But check us out where the show comes out every Sunday, 6 p.m. Central Time, and we kind of do a little something different with the gun rights podcast. We keep our faith front and center. So I'm joined by some really cool people who talk about all kinds of things, including how our faith interacts with our right to carry and own firearms.
Very cool. Beth, I see you're writing all the time, but if people aren't as familiar with you, how can they find what you write?
Well, I work for the USCCA, so you can jump on the usconcealedcarry.com and you can go through some of our blogs and articles there. You can definitely see me in the award-winning Concealed Carry magazine. And in addition to the work that I do specifically with USCCA, if people want to see what classes I'm teaching or what events I'm going to be at or what else is going on in my life, they can also find me on Facebook. I'm not active on Twitter, so look up Pacifiers and Peacemakers with Beth Alcazar. I've got all sorts of craziness going on there.
All right. And Mike, dude, you're with if people follow me on the Daily Bullet, they know Mike. He's on with me every Thursday. But tell people about the rundown and how people can find what you do, what you and Craig do.
You can watch us on the rundown every weekday at 5 p.m. Eastern. That's go to rundown.us or it's over there on Facebook. Arms Room Radio, still the anchor of us, is Saturdays at 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern. We'll be on starting at an hour after we're done here. And I am also not active on Twitter unless I'm trying to get thrown off Twitter. That goes in spurts with me. So.
Yeah, I'm not a twit myself. I don't tweet myself. Whatever. It's I think if you were to look up Paul Lathrop on Twitter, I think got 3 tweets up, and I signed up for Twitter 12 years ago. So yeah, not something I like. But anyway, I do want to remind everybody, if you're catching us now, there will not be a live show next week. Next week, I'm going to be down at right now, exactly 1 week from right now, I'm going to be at the big rally in Phoenix, and we're going to be broadcasting that on the Ops Lens app. If you're catching us on the Ops Lens app, just pull it up next Saturday, and you can watch the rally right from your device, right from your TV, wherever you're getting Ops Lens. If you can get to Phoenix, I'd love to meet you in person. If you can't, and you're catching us on Facebook or YouTube, get the Ops Lens app, and you can catch the rally right from your wherever you choose to, whether it be TV, phone, tablet, whatever. I think that's good because we're now past the hour. I used too much breath talking about the rally, but that's going to do it for us this week. Again, no show next week, but come join us in 2 weeks. Mike, you're going to be back in 2 weeks, right?
Yes, sir, I will be.
All right. And we will also have, let me get to my calendar, I believe I've got that show fully booked up. But, and I'm burning up even more time. Yeah, I've got...
one of the guests.
Yeah, it's going to be Mark Walters and Rob Morse are going to be joining Mike and I in 2 weeks. So thanks for watching, everybody. And come join me on the Daily Bullet, 5 p.m. Central Time every day. And join us in 2 weeks for the Weekly Bullet. Thanks for watching, everybody.